The train whistle cut through the freezing December air like a blade, announcing its arrival at the Florence depot in Arizona Territory with a plume of steam that rose into the darkening sky. And Wade Garrison pulled his Stetson lower against the bitter wind that swept across the platform, wondering what fool would be traveling through this God-forsaken cold on Christmas Eve of 1883. He had come to town for supplies, nothing more, but his mare had thrown a shoe near the blacksmith shop, and by the time old Henderson had finished the work, the sun was already threatening to set. Wade stood near the depot's overhang, waiting for the temperature to drop just a bit more before making the ride back to his ranch, when he noticed her stepping down from the passenger car. She wore a thin cotton dress that might have been pretty in spring but looked pitiful now, her arms wrapped around herself as she descended the metal steps with unsteady legs. No coat, no shawl, nothing but that dress and a small carpet bag that she clutched like it held everything she owned in this world. The woman stumbled on the last step, catching herself against the railing, and Wade saw her whole body trembling. She could not have been more than 20 or 21, with dark hair falling loose from pins that had given up their fight somewhere along the journey. Her lips had taken on a bluish tinge, and her breath came out in visible puffs that seemed to take more effort than they should. Wade moved without thinking. His boots echoed on the wooden platform as he closed the distance between them, already shrugging out of his heavy sheepskin coat. The woman looked up as he approached, and he saw eyes the color of amber catching the last rays of sunlight, wide with exhaustion and something that might have been fear. "Madam," he said, draping the coat over her shoulders before she could protest. The garment swallowed her small frame, and he watched as she instinctively pulled it tight around herself, her fingers disappearing into the sleeves. "You will freeze to death out here dressed like that." She opened her mouth to speak, but her teeth were chattering too hard to form words. Wade noticed the conductor had already moved her trunk onto the platform and was heading back to the train without a second glance. No one else had disembarked. No one waited on the platform to greet her. "Is someone meeting you?" Wade asked, though he already knew the answer from the lost look in her eyes. She shook her head, finally managing to speak through the shivering. "I thought there would be a boarding house. Someone on the train said Florence had a boarding house." "It burned down 3 months ago," Wade said, watching her face fall. "Where were you headed? What brings you to Florence?" "I was supposed to meet someone." Her voice was soft, cultured, entirely out of place in this rough mining territory. "A gentleman I had been corresponding with. He said he would meet me at the station, that we would be married and I would help him run his store." Wade felt his jaw tighten. He knew exactly what kind of arrangement this was, had seen it before. Some lonely shopkeeper back east sending pretty letters and promises to a woman desperate enough or hopeful enough to believe them. "What is his name?" "Thomas Merriweather," she said, hope flickering in her eyes. "Do you know him?" Wade did know him. Thomas Merriweather had died 2 weeks ago when his wagon overturned on the road to Phoenix. The man had been carrying a flask of whiskey that was more full than empty, and everyone in town knew he had drunk himself into that accident. Wade also knew that Merriweather had been a mean drunk with debts at every business in Florence, and this woman had just crossed half the country to marry a dead man who would have made her life miserable even if he had lived. "Madam," Wade said carefully, "Thomas Merriweather passed away about 2 weeks back. I am sorry to be the one to tell you." The color drained from her face, what little was left of it. She swayed on her feet and Wade caught her elbow to steady her. "But I spent everything I had on the train ticket. I sold my grandmother's jewelry to get here. I do not have anywhere to go back to." The train whistle blew again, a warning that it would be departing soon. The few townspeople who had been waiting on the platform had already dispersed into the gathering darkness. The temperature was dropping fast, the way it did in the desert when the sun went down, and Wade could see frost beginning to form on the depot's windows. He made a decision that would change everything, though he could not have known it then. "Come home," he said simply. "I have a ranch about an hour's ride from here. You can stay there tonight, get warm, have a proper meal. Tomorrow we will figure out what comes next." She looked up at him with those amber eyes, searching his face for something, trying to decide if she could trust this stranger who had appeared out of nowhere with his coat and his offer of shelter. Wade met her gaze steadily, letting her see whatever she needed to see. "I do not even know your name," she whispered. "Wade Garrison. I run a cattle ranch west of here, have for the past 5 years since my father passed. I have a housekeeper, Maria, who has been with my family since I was a boy. You will be safe and proper, I give you my word." "Zelda Zimmerman," she said, and he heard the decision in her voice before she spoke it. "Thank you, Mr. Garrison. I accept your kindness." Wade retrieved her trunk, hefting it easily over his shoulder, and guided her toward where his horse and the supply wagon waited. He had brought the wagon into town for the supplies, which now seemed like providence. Zelda could ride on the bench seat instead of trying to manage a horse in her condition. He helped her up, noting how light she felt, how fragile, and wondered when she had last eaten a decent meal. The ride back to the ranch was slow going in the darkness, but Wade knew the road by heart. Zelda sat beside him wrapped in his coat, silent except for the occasional shiver that still worked through her body. He had thrown a blanket over her lap as well, one that usually served to cover supplies, but it was clean enough and added another layer against the cold. "How long were you traveling?" Wade asked, partly to keep her awake, partly because he wanted to hear her voice again. "For days," Zelda said. "I left from Philadelphia, changed trains in Kansas City, then again in Albuquerque. I ran out of food money yesterday." Wade reached into his coat pocket, the one she was wearing, and pulled out a piece of hardtack he had bought at the general store. "It is not much, but it will help until we get to the ranch." She took it with trembling fingers and ate slowly, methodically, like someone who had learned to make small portions last. Wade felt anger rising in his chest, not at her, but at the circumstances that had brought her here, at the dead man who had made promises he probably never intended to keep, at a world that left women with so few choices that they had to travel across a country to marry strangers. The lights of the ranch house came into view as they crested the final hill, warm and welcoming in the darkness. Wade had left them burning when he departed that morning, a habit from living alone, and now he was grateful for it. The house was not grand, just a solid adobe structure with 4 rooms and a wide porch, but it was well built and warm, and it was home. Maria must have heard the wagon because the front door opened before Wade could help Zelda down from the bench. His housekeeper stood in the doorway, a small round woman in her 50s with gray streaking through her black hair and eyes that missed nothing. "Mr. Wade, you are late and I was worried," she called, then stopped when she saw Zelda. "Oh, who is this poor girl?" "This is Miss Zelda Zimmerman," Wade said, lifting Zelda down from the wagon with his hands on her waist. "She needs shelter for the night, maybe longer. Can you prepare the guest room and something hot to eat?" Maria was already moving, ushering Zelda toward the house with a stream of Spanish and English mixed together, words of comfort and welcome that needed no translation. Wade watched them go, then turned to unhitch the horse and unload the supplies. By the time he finished and entered the house through the kitchen door, he could hear water being heated for a bath and Maria's voice still murmuring reassurances. Wade washed up at the kitchen pump, scrubbing the day's dirt from his hands and face, then hung his hat on the peg by the door. The house smelled like the stew Maria had been cooking, rich with beef and vegetables from the ranch's garden, and his stomach reminded him he had not eaten since dawn either. He was setting the table when Maria emerged from the guest room, closing the door softly behind her. "That poor child is half-starved and frozen to the bone," she said, her voice tight with emotion. "What happened to her?" Wade explained while they worked together to prepare a tray for Zelda, who Maria insisted should eat in the warm guest room rather than trying to come to the table. He told her about the train station, about Thomas Merriweather, about the boarding house that no longer existed. "That man was no good," Maria said, crossing herself. "God forgive me for speaking ill of the dead, but she is better off without him. What will she do now?" "I do not know," Wade admitted. "But she can stay here until she figures it out. We have the room, and it is the right thing to do." Maria looked at him with something like pride in her eyes. "Your mother would be happy to see the man you have become, Mr. Wade." "I will make sure the girl is properly cared for." Wade carried the tray to the guest room and knocked softly. Zelda's voice, stronger now, called for him to enter. She had bathed and changed into a nightgown that must have been Maria's, too large but clean and warm. Her dark hair hung damp over her shoulders, and color had started to return to her cheeks. She sat in the room's single chair near the fireplace, where flames crackled and popped, casting dancing shadows on the walls. "Maria said to bring this to you," Wade said, setting the tray on the small table beside her. "Eat as much as you can manage, Mr. Garrison," Zelda said, and he heard tears threatening in her voice. "I do not know how to thank you. You saved my life tonight. I would have frozen at that depot or worse." "Just eat and rest," Wade said. "We can talk about everything else tomorrow." But she was already talking, the words spilling out like she had been holding them in for too long. "I had nothing left in Philadelphia. My parents died of fever 2 years ago, and I had been working as a seamstress, but the factory closed and I could not pay my rent. When Mr. Merriweather's letters came, talking about his successful business and his need for a wife, it seemed like providence. I thought I could make a new life here, be useful, have a home again. I was so stupid." "You were brave," Wade corrected gently. "Stupid would have been staying somewhere you could not survive. You took a chance on something better. That takes courage." She looked up at him with those amber eyes, and Wade felt something shift in his chest, something he had not felt in the 5 years since his father died, and he had thrown himself into running the ranch with no time for anything else. She was beautiful, yes, but it was more than that. There was a strength in her despite the fragility of her circumstances, a determination not to break even though everything had fallen apart. "Eat," he said again, more softly this time. "Sleep. Tomorrow is soon enough for figuring out the rest." Wade left her then, closing the door quietly, and went to his own room at the other end of the house. But sleep was a long time coming. He lay in bed listening to the wind outside and thinking about the woman in his guest room, wondering what fate had brought her to Florence, to his town, to that train station, at exactly the moment he was there to see her. The next morning dawned clear and cold, the kind of winter day that made the desert look like it was covered in diamonds as the frost caught the sunlight. Wade rose early as always, dressing quickly and heading to the kitchen, where Maria already had coffee brewing and breakfast cooking. "The girl is still sleeping," Maria said before he could ask. "Let her rest. God knows she needs it." Wade went out to tend to the morning chores, feeding the horses and checking on the cattle in the near pasture. His ranch was not the largest in the territory, but it was profitable and well run, with good water sources and grazing land that stayed green longer than most. He employed 3 hands who lived in the bunkhouse and handled the day-to-day work, good men who had been with him for years. His foreman, Jack Sullivan, rode up as Wade was finishing at the barn. "Boss, we have got a problem with the fence line on the eastern section. Looks like something broke through in the night." "Show me," Wade said, but before he could follow, he heard the ranch house door open. He turned to see Zelda standing on the porch, wrapped in a shawl Maria must have lent her, looking small and uncertain in the morning light. "Jack, can you handle the fence?" Wade asked. "Take Tom and Red with you. I need to see to something here first." Jack's eyes had already found Zelda, curiosity clear on his weathered face, but he was too well trained to ask questions. "Yes, sir. We will have it fixed by noon." Wade walked back to the house, where Zelda still stood as if unsure whether she was allowed to come outside. "Good morning, Miss Zimmerman. Did you sleep well?" "Better than I have in months," she admitted. "Maria gave me breakfast, more food than I have seen in one sitting in a long time. Mr. Garrison, I need to talk to you about my situation." "Come walk with me," Wade said. "I will show you the ranch." They walked together through the morning, Wade pointing out the various buildings and features of his property, talking about the cattle business and the challenges of ranching in Arizona territory. Zelda listened and asked intelligent questions, her sharp mind evident in the way she grasped the economics of what he was describing. Finally, when they had circled back toward the house, she stopped and turned to face him. "Mr. Garrison, I need work. I cannot simply stay here as your charity case. I am a hard worker and I learn quickly. I can sew, I can keep books, I can cook and clean. Please let me earn my keep while I figure out what to do next." Wade considered her carefully. "Can you really keep books?" "Yes. I kept accounts for the seamstress shop in Philadelphia, and before that, I helped my father with his business. He was a printer, and I learned mathematics and accounting from him." "My books are a mess," Wade admitted. "I have been meaning to organize them properly for months, but there is never enough time. If you could take that on, it would be genuinely helpful, not charity. I can pay you a wage and you can stay in the guest room for as long as you need." The relief that washed over her face was almost painful to see. "Thank you. You will not regret this, I promise." "There is one other thing," Wade said. "Florence is a small town and people talk. For your reputation and mine, we should be clear about the arrangement. You are my bookkeeper, nothing else. Maria lives here as well, so everything is proper." "Of course," Zelda said quickly. "I would never presume anything else." But even as they agreed to the practical arrangement, Wade felt that shift in his chest again, that awareness of her presence that had nothing to do with bookkeeping or propriety. He told himself it was just natural male interest in a pretty woman, nothing more, certainly nothing to act on. She had been through enough without her employer making unwanted advances. The days fell into a routine. Zelda took over the ranch books and brought order to what had been chaos, creating clear ledgers that showed at a glance where the ranch stood financially. She worked at the desk in the main room of the house, and Wade found himself inventing reasons to come inside during the day, just to see her bent over the books with a lock of dark hair falling across her forehead. She filled out as Maria fed her properly, the hollow look leaving her cheeks, though she remained slender and fine-boned. She smiled more often, and Wade discovered she had a quick wit and a laugh that made him want to find more reasons to hear it. In the evenings, after supper, they would sit by the fire and talk, Maria sitting with them as chaperone, though the older woman often fell asleep in her chair. They talked about everything. Zelda told him about growing up in Philadelphia, about her parents, and the life she had known before fever and poverty had taken it all away. Wade told her about his father, about learning to run the ranch, about the loneliness of the past 5 years, spent focused on nothing but work. "Why did you never marry?" Zelda asked one evening about 2 weeks after her arrival. Surely there are eligible women in Florence. Wade stared into the fire, considering his answer. I suppose I never found someone I wanted to talk to at the end of the day. Someone who made me want to come inside instead of finding more work to do. Someone who made the house feel like a home instead of just a place to sleep. When he looked up, Zelda was watching him with an expression he could not quite read, something soft and wondering. "That is a good reason to wait," she said quietly. Christmas came and went, a quiet celebration with just the three of them, but Maria made a feast and Wade gave Zelda a proper winter coat he had bought in town, a deep green wool that brought out the color of her eyes. She gave him a shirt she had sewn, her skilled seamstress hands creating something far finer than anything he owned, with careful stitches and mother-of-pearl buttons. "I hope it is not too forward," she said as he opened the package. "I wanted to thank you properly." "It is perfect," Wade said, and meant it. January brought cold rains that turned the desert green, and Zelda had been with them for a month. Wade knew he was falling in love with her, had probably been falling since that first night at the train depot, but he held back. She had come to Arizona running from desperation, looking for security, and he did not want her to feel obligated to him just because he had helped her. If she stayed, if something grew between them, it had to be because she wanted it, not because she needed it. But it was getting harder to maintain that distance. Harder not to touch her hand when she handed him papers to review. Harder not to sit closer when they talked by the fire. Harder not to tell her that she had become the center of his world in just a few short weeks. One evening in late January, a storm rolled in with dramatic flair, lightning cracking across the sky and thunder shaking the adobe walls. Maria had already gone to bed, and Wade and Zelda sat in the main room, pretending to read but really just listening to the storm. "I love this," Zelda said suddenly. "The storms here are so much more dramatic than back east. Everything here is bigger and wilder and more alive." "Does that mean you are thinking about staying?" Wade asked, trying to keep his voice casual. Zelda set down her book and looked at him directly. "Wade, I need to know something. This past month has been the happiest I have been in years. I feel useful here, needed. I feel like I am building something instead of just surviving. But I need to know if I am fooling myself about why that is." Wade's heart was pounding. "What do you mean?" "I mean that I have feelings for you," she said, her voice steady despite the blush rising in her cheeks. "I think I have had them almost from the beginning, from that moment you put your coat around me and told me to come home. But you have been nothing but proper and professional, and I do not know if I am imagining that you might feel something too, or if I am just another responsibility you have taken on." Wade stood and crossed to where she sat, kneeling down so they were at eye level. "Zelda, I have been holding back because I did not want you to feel pressured. You came here in desperate circumstances, and I did not want to take advantage of that. But if you are asking what I feel, then yes. Yes, I have feelings for you. I am in love with you. I have been for weeks." Her eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "Truly, truly," Wade said. "You have turned this house into a home. You have made me remember what it feels like to look forward to the end of the day, to have someone to talk to share things with. I love your laugh and your wit, and the way you attack those account books like they are personal enemies. I love how you have made friends with Maria and charmed my ranch hands. I love you, Zelda Zimmerman." She reached out and touched his face, her fingers gentle against his stubbled jaw. "I love you too, Wade Garrison. I think I started falling in love with you that first night, when you could have left me at that station but did not. When you saw me at my lowest and still treated me with dignity and kindness." Wade leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, but she met him halfway. Their first kiss was soft and tentative, a question and an answer all at once. Then Zelda made a small sound in the back of her throat and pressed closer, and the kiss deepened. Weeks of restrained feeling pouring out in that moment. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Wade rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he said. "Not because you need security, not because you have nowhere else to go, but because I want to spend every day for the rest of my life with you. Marry me because you love me and I love you." "Yes," Zelda said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, absolutely yes." They were married 3 weeks later in the small church in Florence, with Maria crying happy tears and the whole town turning out for the celebration. Zelda wore a dress she had made herself, cream-colored silk with delicate lace, and Wade wore the shirt she had sewn for Christmas. Judge Henderson, who also served as the town's occasional minister, performed the ceremony with warmth and humor, noting that he had never seen two people more clearly meant for each other. At the reception held at the ranch, Jack Sullivan raised a glass in toast. "To the boss and his beautiful bride, may they have many years of happiness together." "Hear, hear," chorused the gathered guests, and Wade looked down at Zelda, now his wife, and saw his own joy reflected in her eyes. Their wedding night was tender and passionate, all the restraint of the past weeks finally released. Wade was gentle, knowing this was new for Zelda, and she was responsive and eager, her love for him clear in every touch and whispered word. Afterward they lay tangled together in his bed, now their bed, and talked until dawn. "I keep thinking about that night at the station," Zelda said, her head on Wade's chest. "I was so scared and cold and alone. I thought my life was over, that I had made a terrible mistake coming here. But it was actually the beginning of everything." "Providence," Wade said, kissing the top of her head. "Something brought you to Florence that exact day at that exact time. Something made my horse throw that shoe, so I was there to see you." "You believe in fate?" Zelda asked. "I do now," Wade said. The months that followed were full of hard work and hard-won joy. Zelda took over not just the books but also the management of the household, working with Maria to make the ranch run smoothly. She had a head for business that impressed Wade, suggesting improvements and efficiencies he had never considered. Under her management, the ranch became even more profitable, but it was not all work. They rode together in the evenings when the day's tasks were done, exploring the desert landscape that Zelda had come to love. Wade taught her to shoot, and she turned out to be a natural, her seamstress's steady hand serving her well with a rifle. She taught him to appreciate poetry and literature, reading aloud while he worked on repairing tack or other evening tasks. They made love often, and with growing passion as Zelda's initial shyness faded and she discovered her own desires. Wade had never known such happiness existed, never imagined he could feel this complete. Every day with Zelda felt like a gift. In May, Zelda realized she was pregnant. She told Wade over breakfast, Maria having conveniently found reasons to be elsewhere, and watched nervously for his reaction. Wade whooped with joy, actually lifting her from her chair and spinning her around despite her laughing protests. "A baby! We are going to have a baby!" "I hoped you would be happy," Zelda said, breathless from the spinning and from relief. "Happy does not begin to cover it," Wade said, setting her down carefully, suddenly aware of his own strength. "Are you feeling well? Should you be resting? What do you need?" "I need you to stop spinning me around," Zelda laughed. "And to keep treating me like a normal person instead of something fragile. I am pregnant, not made of glass." But Wade could not help being protective, and Zelda could not help finding it endearing even when it was excessive. As her belly grew round with their child, Wade found himself constantly amazed by the changes in her body, the visible proof of the life they had created together. He would place his hand on her stomach and feel the baby kick, and the wonder of it would wash over him anew each time. Maria was beside herself with excitement, already knitting tiny clothes and planning the nursery. The ranch hands treated Zelda with even more deference than before, and Jack Sullivan took to handling anything that might require lifting or straining, much to Zelda's amused exasperation. "I am not an invalid," she protested after Jack insisted on carrying a basket of laundry that could not have weighed more than 10 pounds. "No, madam," Jack agreed, "but the boss would have my hide if I let you carry anything heavier than a teacup, and I am fond of my hide." In November, as the weather turned cool again, almost exactly a year after Zelda had arrived in Florence, their son was born. The labor was long and difficult, and Wade paced the main room while Maria and the midwife attended Zelda in the bedroom. Every cry of pain from behind that closed door felt like a knife to his heart, and he found himself praying to a God he had not talked to much since his father's death. Finally, as the sun was setting, he heard a different cry, a baby's cry, and then Maria was opening the door with tears streaming down her face. "You have a son, Mr. Wade. A beautiful, healthy son, and Zelda is well, tired but well." Wade rushed into the room to find Zelda propped up in bed, exhausted and sweaty but smiling, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in white cloth. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Wade approached slowly, almost reverently, and looked down at the small face peeking out from the blanket. The baby had dark hair like his mother and was making small snuffling sounds as he rooted against Zelda's chest. "He is perfect," Wade whispered. "You are perfect. Thank you, Zelda. Thank you for this gift." "What should we name him?" Zelda asked. "I was thinking William, after your father." Wade felt his throat tighten with emotion. "William Wade Garrison. It is a strong name." They called him Will from the start, and he was a good baby, rarely fussy, seeming content to observe the world with solemn eyes that gradually changed from blue to hazel. Wade discovered a capacity for love he had not known he possessed, marveling at how this tiny person had so completely captured his heart. Zelda was a natural mother, patient and loving but also practical, not given to the hysterics some women supposedly experienced. She managed the baby and the household and even the ranch books, though Wade and Maria insisted she take more time for rest than she had before. The year will turned one. The ranch had its best year ever, allowing Wade to buy additional land and expand the herd. Zelda's management skills had transformed the operation, and Wade made sure everyone knew that his wife was as much responsible for their success as he was. She had become respected in Florence not just as Wade Garrison's wife, but as a businesswoman in her own right. They celebrated Will's first birthday with a party at the ranch, inviting the whole town, and Wade looked around at the gathered friends and neighbors, at his healthy son, at his beautiful wife, and felt a contentment so deep it was almost painful. This life, this family, this home, all of it had started with a moment of simple human kindness at a train depot on a cold December evening. That night, after the guests had gone and Will was asleep in his crib, Wade and Zelda sat on the porch in the cool evening air, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. Zelda leaned against Wade's shoulder, and he wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you had not been at that station that night?" Zelda asked. "If your horse had not thrown that shoe, if you had already left town, all the time," Wade admitted. "It terrifies me to think about it, but then I remember what you said about fate. Something brought us together, Zelda, something wanted us to find each other." "I am glad it did," Zelda said softly. "I am glad you saw me shivering there. I am glad you wrapped your coat around me and told me to come home. I am glad I trusted you. This is your home now," Wade said, "for always." You and Will and whatever other children we might have. This is your home, Zelda, and you are my home." She turned her face up to his, and he kissed her, a kiss that held all the love and gratitude and wonder of the year they had shared. When they finally drew apart, Zelda was smiling. "Should we give Will a sibling? I think he would like a brother or sister to play with." "I think that is an excellent idea," Wade said, standing and pulling her to her feet. "But Maria has Will for the night, and we should not waste the opportunity." Zelda laughed, that same laugh that had captivated him from the beginning, and let him lead her inside to their bedroom. They made love slowly and sweetly, in no rush, secure in the knowledge that they had all the time in the world. True to Zelda's prediction, she was pregnant again by spring. This pregnancy was easier than the first, perhaps because she knew what to expect, perhaps because she was stronger and healthier now after 2 years of good food and happy living. She glowed with contentment, chasing after Will, who had become a determined toddler with his father's stubbornness and his mother's intelligence. Their daughter was born in January of 1886, 3 years after Zelda's arrival in Florence. The labor was shorter this time, and when Wade was allowed into the bedroom, he found Zelda sitting up and looking triumphant, holding a tiny girl with a shock of dark hair and lungs that promised she would never lack for attention. "We have a daughter," Zelda said, her voice filled with wonder. "A perfect little girl. I was thinking we could name her Grace, for the grace that brought us together." "Grace Maria Garrison," Wade said, including Maria's name to honor the woman who had helped them both so much. "It is beautiful, just like her mother." Grace was a different baby than Will had been, more demanding and vocal, but no less loved. Will was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to help with everything, and Wade would often find his son standing by the cradle just watching Grace sleep. The ranch continued to prosper, and Wade and Zelda began to be seen as one of the leading families in Florence. They used their success to help others, remembering how close Zelda had come to disaster. When they heard of another woman arriving to marry a man who had misrepresented himself, Zelda made sure she had options. When families struggled with drought or illness, Wade extended credit at fair terms. They became known for their generosity and their fairness. But for all their public success, it was the private moments Wade treasured most. Reading to the children before bed, with Will on one side and Grace on his lap. Working alongside Zelda on the ranch books, their heads bent together over the ledgers. Riding out across the ranch land with his family, showing them the boundaries of their home. Making love to his wife in the quiet hours after the children were asleep, never losing the passion that had ignited between them. The years passed with the speed that happiness brings. Will grew into a serious boy who loved the ranch and seemed destined to follow in his father's footsteps. Grace was wild and fearless, more likely to be found climbing trees than playing with dolls. Zelda's hair began to show a few threads of silver, which Wade found incredibly attractive. Wade himself filled out, the lean young rancher becoming a solid, established man. In 1890, when Will was 6 and Grace was 4, Zelda gave birth to their third child, another son they named Henry. And in 1893, their final child, a daughter named Rose, completed their family. The ranch house, which had seemed so empty when Wade lived there alone, now rang with the sounds of children playing, laughing, arguing, living. Maria, now well into her 60s, ruled the household with loving firmness, and the children adored her. Wade's ranch hands stayed on year after year, drawn by fair treatment and good pay, becoming part of the extended family. Jack Sullivan, who had never married, became Uncle Jack to the Garrison children and could often be found teaching them to rope or ride. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Wade took Zelda back to the train depot in Florence. It had been renovated since that cold December night, made larger and more modern, but the platform was the same. They stood there in the afternoon sun, so different from that freezing evening, and Wade pulled Zelda close. 10 years ago, I saw a woman shivering on this platform, he said. I had no idea that in trying to help her, I would be saving myself. You have given me everything, Zelda. A home, a family, a purpose beyond just work. You have given me a life worth living. Zelda had tears in her eyes. You saved me, Wade. In every way a person can be saved. I was lost and alone and terrified, and you saw me. You really saw me. And then you loved me, not for what I could give you, but for who I was. I love you more now than I did when we married, and I loved you then. They kissed there on the platform, not caring who might see, two people who had found each other against all odds and built something lasting and true. When they finally drew apart, Wade wrapped his arm around Zelda's shoulders, just as he had wrapped his coat around her that first night, and together they walked back to the wagon where their children waited. The years continued to pass, bringing challenges and triumphs both. There were droughts that tested their resolve and illnesses that scared them. Will broke his arm falling from a horse, and Grace nearly drowned in the creek during spring runoff, saved only by Jack's quick action. But there were more good times than bad, more laughter than tears, more love than fear. Wade watched his children grow with pride and wonder. Will became a fine rancher, serious and hardworking, learning everything Wade could teach him. Grace proved to have her mother's head for numbers, and by age 12 was helping with the ranch books. Henry was the charmer, able to talk his way out of any trouble, with a smile that reminded Wade of Zelda. And Rose, the baby, turned out to have a gift with horses that surprised everyone. Zelda remained the center of their family, the heart of their home. She managed the ranch business with skill and the household with love, and Wade fell more deeply in love with her with each passing year. She had never lost the strength that had brought her across the country on the word of a stranger, but it had been tempered now with confidence and contentment. They still sat on the porch in the evenings when they could, talking and watching the sunset, though now they were often joined by children and dogs and the general chaos of a large, happy family. But sometimes, when the children were occupied elsewhere, they would steal a few moments alone, and Wade would pull Zelda close and remember that cold December night that had changed everything. In 1895, 12 years after they met, Wade and Zelda celebrated Will's 12th birthday with the usual party. But afterward, when the guests had gone and the children were in bed, Wade gave Zelda a private gift, a locket containing a small photograph of the Florence train depot. "So you never forget where we started," he said as he fastened it around her neck. Zelda touched the locket with gentle fingers, then looked up at Wade with eyes that still held all the love and wonder of their early days. "I could never forget. That night was the worst night of my life and the best night of my life all at once. I was so lost, and then I was found. By you. We found each other," Wade corrected. "And I thank God every day that we did." They made love that night with the passion of longtime lovers, who knew each other's bodies intimately, but never lost the thrill of discovery. Afterward, as Zelda slept in his arms, Wade lay awake thinking about the journey that had brought them to this moment. If someone had told him that cold December day that the shivering woman at the train depot would become the love of his life, the mother of his children, his partner in every way that mattered, he would have thought them crazy. But fate, or providence, or simple blind luck had known better. The turn of the century brought changes to Arizona Territory and to Florence. The town grew, adding electric lights and other modern conveniences. Automobiles began to appear on the streets, though Wade insisted that horses were still more practical for ranch work. The ranch itself had grown to be one of the largest and most successful in the region, a testament to hard work and good management. Will, at 18, had become Wade's right hand, tall and capable, with his mother's sharp mind and his father's steady temperament. He had also started courting a girl from town, a sweet-natured brunette named Sarah, and Wade suspected there would be a wedding before long. The thought of becoming a grandfather filled him with unexpected joy. Grace, at 16, had announced her intention to go to college, a bold move for a woman, but one Wade and Zelda supported wholeheartedly. She wanted to study business and accounting, to formalize the skills she had learned from her mother. Henry, at 12, was still finding his way, trying on different dreams the way other boys tried on hats. And Rose, at 9, spent every spare moment in the stables, already declaring she would breed horses when she grew up. On Christmas Eve of 1901, 18 years to the day after Wade had first seen Zelda at the train depot, the family gathered at the ranch for their traditional celebration. The house was full of noise and warmth, Maria's cooking filling the air with delicious smells, the children arguing cheerfully over some game they were playing. Will had brought Sarah, who fit into the family as if she had always been there. Jack Sullivan sat in his usual chair by the fire, looking older now but still spry, telling tall tales that had the children enthralled. Wade stood in the doorway watching it all, feeling the weight of his happiness like a physical thing in his chest. Zelda came up beside him, slipping her hand into his, and together they surveyed the life they had built. 18 years, Zelda said softly, echoing his own thoughts. 18 years since you wrapped your coat around me and told me to come home. Best decision I ever made, Wade said, squeezing her hand. Every good thing in my life started that night. Mine too, Zelda said. I was so scared, Wade. I thought my life was over, but it was just beginning. Will called for them to come join the family for dinner, and Wade and Zelda exchanged a glance, a whole conversation in that look built on years of love and understanding. Then they walked together into the warmth and noise of their family, their home, their life. The meal was chaotic and wonderful, with everyone talking over each other and reaching across the table and laughing at Henry's jokes and Maria's scolding. Afterward, they exchanged simple gifts, nothing fancy but everything chosen with care and love. Wade gave Zelda a new saddle custom-made to her specifications, and she gave him a watch with an inscription on the back. To Wade, who gave me time and a future. With all my love, Zelda. As the evening wound down and the children were sent to bed, though the older ones would undoubtedly stay up whispering for hours, Wade and Zelda once again found themselves on the porch, wrapped in blankets against the December chill. The sky was clear, the stars brilliant in the darkness, and Wade could hear coyotes singing in the distance. You remember what you said to me that first night? Zelda asked. When you brought me here and I was so scared and overwhelmed. I said a lot of things that night, Wade replied. Which part? You said, come home, Zelda said. Not come to my house or I will give you shelter. You said, come home, like you already knew that was what this place would become for me. Wade thought about it, about that night and that moment and the decision that had seemed so simple at the time. Maybe some part of me did know. Maybe I saw something in you even then that recognized home. I felt it too, Zelda admitted. Even scared and half frozen and sure that my life was falling apart, there was something about you, something that felt safe and right. I trusted you so quickly, which was unlike me, but something in me knew. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds, feeling the warmth of each other's presence. Wade thought about all the years behind them and all the years still to come, thought about grandchildren and the ranch passing to Will and growing old with this woman beside him. "Zelda," he said finally, "if I could go back to that day and change things, I would not change a single moment. Not the cold, not the broken horseshoe, not the timing that put us both at that depot at the exact same time. Because it all brought me to you, and you are the best thing that ever happened to me." Zelda turned to face him, her amber eyes reflecting the light spilling from the house windows. "I would not change anything either, not the poverty or the desperation or even Thomas Merriweather's lies. Because it all led me here to you, to this life we have built together. I would live through it all again just to end up right here, right now with you." Wade cupped her face in his hands and kissed her, a kiss that held 18 years of love and commitment and partnership. When they drew apart, both of them were smiling. "Come on," Zelda said, standing and pulling him to his feet. "Let us go inside where it is warm. Our family is waiting." "Our family," Wade repeated, loving the sound of those words. "Yes, let us go home." They walked inside together, closing the door on the cold December night, stepping into the warmth and light of the home they had made. Through the doorway, Wade could see Will showing Sarah something, probably discussing the ranch and their future. Grace sat with a book, already preparing for the academic challenges ahead. Henry and Rose were playing cards under Maria's watchful eye. Jack had fallen asleep in his chair, a smile on his weathered face. This was home, Wade thought. Not the building, not the land, though he loved both. Home was the people, the love, the connections that bound them all together. Home was Zelda's hand in his, her presence beside him, the life they had created from a chance meeting on a cold train platform. The years continued to flow like water, each one bringing its own joys and sorrows. Will married Sarah in a beautiful ceremony at the ranch in 1902. And by 1904, Wade and Zelda were grandparents to a baby boy named after Wade. Grace went off to college in California, making the family proud with her academic achievements and returning with a teaching degree and a husband, a professor of mathematics. Henry found his calling in law, articulating his natural charm into a successful practice in Phoenix. And Rose did indeed become a horse breeder, establishing a reputation for quality stock that spread throughout the territory. Through it all, Wade and Zelda remained the anchors, the foundation upon which their family was built. They aged together gracefully, their love deepening with each passing year rather than fading. Wade's hair went white, and Zelda moved a bit slower, but the spark between them never dimmed. They could still make each other laugh, still had long conversations that lasted into the night, still reached for each other in the darkness. Maria passed peacefully in her sleep in 1907, and the family mourned the woman who had been so much more than a housekeeper. She had been a second mother to Wade, a friend and confidant to Zelda, a grandmother figure to the children. They buried her on the ranch with a headstone that read, "Maria Santos, beloved friend and family. Home is where she made it." Jack Sullivan followed a few years later, dying as he had lived, in the saddle during a routine check of the cattle. Wade found him slumped over his horse's neck, a peaceful expression on his face, as if he had simply decided it was time to rest. They buried him next to Maria, and Wade spoke at the service about loyalty and friendship, and the family you choose. By 1915, Arizona had achieved statehood, and the wild frontier that Wade and Zelda had known was largely tamed. The ranch had been passed to Will, who ran it with the same care and skill his father had shown. Wade and Zelda had moved into a smaller house on the property, content to let the next generation take over while they enjoyed their grandchildren and each other. They celebrated their 33rd wedding anniversary quietly, just the two of them, with a simple dinner and a bottle of good wine. They were in their 50s now, still healthy and active but aware of their mortality in a way they had not been in their youth. 33 years, Zelda marveled. It feels like both forever and no time at all. I know exactly what you mean, Wade said. Sometimes I look at you and I still see that shivering girl on the train platform. Other times I see every year we have lived together, every experience written on your face, and I love you even more for it. We have had a good life, Wade, Zelda said seriously. Better than I ever dreamed possible. We have raised good children who are raising good children. We have built something that will last beyond us. We have loved each other well. Not many people can say that. No, Wade agreed. Not many people are as lucky as we have been. They made love that night with the tenderness of long practice, bodies that knew each other intimately, hearts that beat in synchrony. Afterward, lying in the darkness with Zelda's head on his shoulder, Wade thought about the journey that had brought them here, about fate and providence, and the simple human kindness that started it all. "Zelda," he said softly, not sure if she was still awake, "thank you for coming home with me that night. Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for building this life with me." "Thank you for seeing me," Zelda replied, her voice drowsy but clear. "Thank you for wrapping your coat around me and offering me shelter when I had nothing. Thank you for loving me. Always," Wade promised. "For whatever time we have left, for whatever comes next, always." They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms, two people who had found each other against impossible odds and made something beautiful from their unlikely beginning. Outside, the desert night was cool and clear, stars wheeling overhead in their eternal dance, coyotes singing their ancient songs. And inside, in the small house on the ranch that Wade had built and Zelda had made a home, two hearts beat together, bound by a love that had started on a cold December night at a train depot in Florence, Arizona territory, when a rancher saw a woman shivering and offered her the greatest gift one person can give another: a home and a chance at happiness. The story of Wade and Zelda Garrison would be told in Florence for generations to come, a reminder that sometimes the greatest love stories begin with the simplest acts of kindness, and that fate has a way of bringing together people who need each other most. Their legacy lived on in their children and grandchildren, in the ranch that still bore the Garrison name, in the memories of those who had known them and loved them. But perhaps the greatest legacy was the lesson they taught simply by living their lives together. That home is not a place but a person, that love can bloom in the most unlikely circumstances, and that the best decision you can ever make is to see someone in need and say, without hesitation or expectation of return, "Come home."